The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and X Zone TV. 1-800-610-7035, toll-free worldwide. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv at hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. There was a press conference held earlier today, and 4 members of the U.S. Air Force claim aliens interfered with nuclear weapons, including during one of the most famous UFO incidents in Britain. UFO researcher Robert Hastings held a press conference in Washington today to address the vital issue of UFO incursions at U.S. nuclear sites over the past 6 decades. Mr. Hastings said more than 100 former or retired U.S. Air Force personnel, once entrusted to operate or guard weapons of mass destruction, have come forward and revealed ongoing UFO surveillance of and occasional interference with our nuclear weapons. Now, this is a quote from Mr. Hastings. The information alters the historical perspective on the nuclear arms race and much, much more. The fact that the Pentagon and CIA have successfully kept the truth from the public for so long is in itself mind-boggling. Next on Nation, the Rendlesham Forest incident, often described as Britain's Roswell, was used as one of the examples of evidence of aliens that had targeted nuclear weapons. Now, for those of you who may not remember, the incident happened in the early hours of December the 27th, 1980, and was never fully explained. Several U.S. Air Force personnel reported seeing a strange metallic object hovering in the forests near RAF Woodbridge in Suffolk. The object apparently had left three depressions or landing marks in the ground. But papers released by the National Archives show the Ministry of Defense's final position was that there was no evidence of anything having intruded into British airspace. Joining me now on the telephone from the Washington Press Club, where this first press conference was held earlier today, is Steve Bassett. Now, Steve is the leading advocate for ending the 63-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. Steve is a political activist, commentator, and columnist. He is also the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group and Political Action Committee, XPAC, and the executive producer of the X Conference. His work has been extensively covered by the international media, and the website for the Paradigm Research Group is www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Steve Bassett. Steve, how are you, good sir?
As always, I am great and happy to be on your show.
Steve, you covered the press conference. Now, I've got to take my commercial break in about a minute, Steve. Can you just set up the press conference for us?
All right. Keep in mind, I didn't cover it. I'm not a journalist. I'm an activist, but I was there. And it was an extremely important event. It had at least 20-some reporters in there, approximately 10 camera crews from various stations. You could not tell which, but I'm sure we're going to see a number of media video interviews. It lasted 2 hours. I left before the one-on-one interviews took place, but I'm sure they're taking place now. And most importantly, it was live streamed by CNN, the entire 2 hours. And so That will be up on CNN's site, I am certain. It will also be captured by others and will be on YouTube in due course. So the full press conference is available worldwide. And there's not much to say about it, but it's one of the most important press conferences on the subject ever held. And it could generate some substantial downstream impact.
All right, Steve, please stand by. You and I have to take our first commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Steve Bassett is our special guest. He's the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group, www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits, and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
Steve Bassett is my very special guest of this hour. Steve has just come out of a press conference in Washington, D.C. that was held at the National Press Club. And the press conference was with reference to members of the United States Air Force coming forward and saying, hey, listen, aliens interfered with nuclear weapons. Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Steve Bassett, who is the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group. And Steve, who was in attendance at the conference, giving the press conference, and was there anything that really shocked those in attendance?
Well, all right, the conference was put together by Robert Hastings, who is the author of UFOs and Nukes, an extremely important book that lays all of this out in obviously a much more comprehensive fashion. But of course, along the way, he had to interview many witnesses related to that subject, including a number who have come forward in the past. And that opened up the door for putting together a press conference with a number of the key witnesses, coming before the media. He put this conference together with the assistance of Captain Salas, one of the key witnesses. It was reasonably well promoted in advance, got substantial advance coverage, more than I've seen in a long time, and as a result, substantial reporters were there, at least 20 and 10 camera crews. The long and the short of it is that Lieutenant Colonel Dwayne Arneson, let me see what is Commander Bruce Fernsmacher, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt, researcher Robert Hastings, Lieutenant Robert Jameson, and Command Navy Chief Patrick McDonough, Deputy Missile Crew Commander Jerry Nelson, and Captain Robert Salas, all who over the years have been involved in incidents in which UFOs, in some cases hovering 100 feet to 300 feet off the ground, clearly discernible in terms of shape, with flashing and rotating lights, and discs running between approximately 30 and 50 feet in diameter, engage nuclear facilities, and in most notably, affected nuclear missiles by shutting them down. Not destroying them, but shutting them down. They were later turned back on and were functional. These are extraordinary events. They've been known to the UFO ET research community for some time. They've gotten publicity, the initial publicity in the modern era comes when Bob Salas comes forward courageously. But the media has been able to generally sidestep it, which is what they do. I mean, that's how the truth embargo lives on. However, what these gentlemen have done is create a 2-hour press conference that was soberly and low-key delivered, wrapped up by signed affidavits from each of the witnesses. It was run tight. It was only really open to the press, credentialed press, and political staffers, so they've shown up. There were only a couple of public sitting in the back, and it was just solid from beginning to end. There were some speculations, of course, that emerged regarding the intention of extraterrestrials in these events. Were they threatening, or were they sending a message? It's all provocative, but they made it clear these were speculations. Only the ETs know exactly what their intentions were with respect to these incidents. Mm-hmm. The questions from the media were strong. They were fine. There was only one silly question asked, and that was from the reporter from, wait for it, the Washington Post.
What was his question?
And I'm sorry?
What was his question?
After listening to 2 hours of extraordinarily compelling
mm-hmm.
and important national security testimony, his question was, how come the audio tape of Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt regarding that he made the night that he was out, the night he was out there, trying to address what was happening in Rendlesham Forest, turned up at some cocktail parties. I almost fell off my chair, but let me state, and I say this without knowing what this gentleman's article is going to be, but I'm sure he's going to write something. It'll be in the Washington Post tomorrow, and it may be a great article. But if it reflects that question, then it sadly reinforces the fact of the huge tragedy that the Washington Post, the well-known and established political paper of record in America, has utterly failed its readership and the American people by an abysmal coverage of this issue. It's an absolute journalistic disgrace that I do not think they can ever possibly live down. And I don't think even the great Bob Woodward can save them. And he's never covered the issue. But who knows? Maybe this guy will write an article. But that was the only ridiculous question. Let me point out that Charles Holt got up there and laid that question completely to rest, made it clear what happened, how that happened, and left him absolutely no wiggle room to work off of that. And he asked it in a rather smug way. Again, I reach out to the Washington Post and say, please, for the sake of your legacy, for the sake of all the good you have done over the years, and the paper has done some great reportage, end your complicity in this truth embargo and stop acting like idiots and start covering this issue with solid reportage. It's still not too late.
Steve and I had Peter Davenport on the show last week, and Peter was saying the biggest problem with UFO the UFO field right now is that there are not enough qualified investigators hitting the streets, pounding the pavement to get the investigation information that is so critical, that everything is done electronically, sitting behind a desk now.
Well, let's understand something. With almost no exception, all the investigators that have been in this field have not been paid.
Yeah.
There's no money. There's no research funding. There's nothing. These people have gone into their own pockets. Now some of them have gone bankrupt. Some of them have destroyed themselves over this issue. And so while I appreciate, why isn't there, think tanks? Why isn't there highly paid investigators? The government has embargoed this issue for 60 years. It has made it a national state policy that there's nothing here. And they've even gone so far as to undermine the issue, embarrass the people in it, ridicule it, plant silly articles and tabloids that the government founded through the CIA. We're talking about a massive effort of misrepresentation of reality. And the citizens that have engaged us have done so out of their own pocket. And so, I wish there were millions and millions of dollars, but there isn't. And so we need to stop, pointing at the field and saying, why didn't you do that, and why didn't you do this, and why haven't this, and just point at the real problem. The real problem is a state political policy that the acknowledgement and the development of a collective understanding of an extraterrestrial engagement is not to be permitted under state policy. That is the problem. And until we focus there and end that policy of embargo, we will continue to operate in this highly limited situation where the mainstream, highly paid media give a free ride and do nothing.
Now, yesterday, a story broke out of the United Kingdom, and the story is from the Telegraph. The headline is, UN to appoint space ambassador to greet alien visitors. Let me see. A space ambassador could be appointed by the United Nations to act as the first point of contact for aliens trying to communicate with Earth. Mazlan Othman, a Malaysian astrophysicist, is set to be tasked with coordinating humanity's response if and when extraterrestrials make contact. Aliens who landed on Earth and asked, "Take me to your leader," would be directed to Mrs. Othman. Is this a sign of the times? Is this a sign that, more and more people are saying, what's the truth, that you've got the United Nations now jumping on board?
Well, yes. In a few words, what's going on is that the embargo is in its last days. Mm-hmm. A growing number of people know this. Some have known it for some time. And obviously it's a big deal. And there are many, many institutions out there who have much to answer for, who want to be involved in the issue appropriately, whether it's the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, the CIA, the Catholic Church, the UN, political parties, you name it. And what they're doing, and scientists, mainstream scientists that don't want to be looked at as like, gee, how'd you miss that, like Stephen Hawking? What they're doing, without, again, I guess, putting themselves at too much risk, is they're positioning themselves. They're putting out little statements, or they're taking measures, such as many of these countries that are releasing thousands of UFO files, to position themselves to the extent they can on the right side of the issue, on the side of the angels, as it were. And the UN, poor UN, which has been marginalized by the Cold War, dominated Security Council, which has been allowed to degrade, to become corrupt, been underfunded and ridiculed by the right in America mostly, but from other directions, is sitting up there and knows full well, there are plenty of people in the UN that know there's an ET presence, and it's thinking, gee, we ought to be the ones that are sort of engaging this on behalf of the planet. The ETs didn't come down here just to hang with the Democratic Party or the Catholics. They are engaging the entire human race, but we're just neglected. And so this is a small measure on their part to sort of raise their hand and say, don't forget about us.
Right.
And while it's not significantly impacting in terms of the issue, it is important in that it's going to raise a number of news stories. This is an easy news story. Now, most of the news stories are a little bit silly, and they're mischaracterizing what happened. I mean, they essentially are saying, look, this issue seems to be increasingly in the public's awareness, and we do have an outer space affairs office, and so we're going to designate this in the person as kind of a go-to person if things go wrong. Nothing unusual about that. So you combine that with the repeated statements by the Catholic Church that the ET issue is not a problem for them, the fact that they've held now 2 exobiology conferences in Rome, one at the Vatican, one nearby. When you look at the Royal Society of London holding an exobiology conference shortly after the Vatican's conference, the statement by Stephen Hawking, yeah, ETs are almost certainly out there, but don't talk to them. These are all positioning maneuvers.
All right, stand by, Steve. Steve,
yes.
We've got to take our commercial break with the news. Please stand by. Exonation, Steve Bassett is our special guest this hour. He is the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group. Their website is www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. And we'll be back on the other side of this news break as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name's Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Stephen Bassett's our special guest. He is the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group. Their website is www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. Steve, was there anything that you yourself was unaware of when it comes to the information that has been out over the years in the field of ufology that came out today that has never been revealed before?
I'm pretty knowledgeable on the subject, so I was aware of most everything that was mentioned today by the 7 or 8 witnesses. However, I'm pretty sure that most of the reporters in that room were hearing it for the first time, which is fine. You know, it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Probably the one thing that caught my attention was that the reporter for the Stars and Stripes, which is a publication which serves the American military, asked Robert Hastings if there had been any recent sightings since the ones that were being mentioned in this press conference, I think, that went up through 1980. And Robert mentioned that there had been a number. 2007, 2003, and several others that he was aware of and was researching. And the reason that those were not included in today's press conference were that the people involved, in almost every case, were still serving military. And they are not prepared to come before the public until such time as they leave the military. So what he was saying is that incidents in and around nuclear facilities involving the ET craft are continuing to go on. Now, the other thing I want to mention, this is very intriguing. Both Robert Salas and Robert Hastings made it clear in their presentation that they personally believe that these events are fundamentally not hostile. Now, the other 6 gentlemen there were not so committal. They kind of stood down from those speculations. I think the sense I got was that they may be leaning that way, but they're not prepared to make a definitive speculation. And this was asked and brought up by several of the reporters. And it's a non-trivial matter. What are the intentions of the ETs with respect to this? And obviously, if we weren't living under a truth embargo, this would be a wonderful debate that you would be seeing all over the television, and perhaps in the colleges and universities, where people would be interpreting this evidence and events and saying, well, what do you think their intention is? But of course, those debates don't take place.
But you know, you've got to.
Don't happen.
You know, there's a lot of difference of opinion within even the organizations like the United Nations. For example, if we look at the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, UN members agreed to protect Earth against contamination by alien species by sterilizing them. Like, that doesn't sound like a very nice way to welcome anybody.
Well, we understand that was a long time ago. I think their principal concern was, you know, there's evidence of the existence of life in space, that it can actually move through space and certain forms, panspermia.
Yeah. And,
you know, there's a legitimate concern about possible contamination. We're sending probes out. We're bringing some back from engaging comets, from engaging the moon and Mars. We're actually engaging the moon. We may eventually bring probes back from Mars. And so, but that's what that was about. It wasn't like, oh, if any ETs would have to sterilize. But, you know, it's fairly crude. I mean, you wouldn't see something like that today. The fact is that you can be assured that behind the truth embargo, behind the facade, there are highly sophisticated groups within our military intelligence world and within the military intelligence worlds of the United Kingdom, certainly China and Russia, who are thinking about and developing protocols to deal with full open contact should it take place. And the linking is highly sophisticated. Obviously, we know nothing about that because if they were to allow such thinking to come forward, it could bring the truth embargo to an end, and they're not ready to end it.
All right, but I'm
not concerned about our sophistication in the matter, only that the public has been denied involvement too long.
All right, you said a few seconds ago, should alien contact. Why would you say that if you were so sure that they are here, and even when talking about the military and what they might do, you know, why would you use should alien contact?
Yes, that is let me clarify, you're right. I'm glad you caught that, Robert. What I meant by that is should full open alien contact take place, where it's not, you know, in the middle of the night, one-on-one between a human and ETs, or events that are taking place that are not out in the open, but rather open, acknowledged contact. Ships in the skies, people know it. Engagement between ETs and government, people know it. That kind of contact. Believe me, there's plenty of contact going on, but I refer to that. It is that's when we're beyond disclosure. We're now in the post-disclosure world. We're now in the post-open contact world. That's another major step forward. And what I'm saying is that I can assure you, down in the deep recesses of the military intelligence world, highly sophisticated thinking and protocols are being put together to deal with that situation when it comes around. So these things you see happening on the surface, the odd thing by the UN, statements in the past, that's all it's not substantive really. It's part of the mirage that has been created in order to service the truth embargo.
But how can the government agencies cover up such sightings as the Phoenix Lights? Like, thousands of people saw it, and yet here we are several years later, and it's basically been forgotten.
Well, they didn't cover it up. The truth embargo is a highly sophisticated management program. I mean, they can't quote make the ET secret. They're all over the place. They can't kill all the witnesses off. What they had to do, and it wasn't easy, but they had plenty of money and basically carte blanche during the Cold War. What they had to do is to ghettoize the issue. This is a very, very useful and highly effective tool. Is if you can ridicule it, isolate it, ghettoize it, in this case the walls were not made of bricks, they were made of ridicule, then you can prevent it from becoming an accepted and appropriate consensus. If you can keep the Congress from engaging it, few or no hearings, if you can keep the media from going past a certain point, if you can prevent funding of citizens groups and citizens research, again, by ridiculing the issue so people are just too afraid to touch it, if you can keep the colleges from teaching it, then even though ETs are zipping around all over the place, the citizen effort to resolve the issue will not resolve it. And this is what they did. And, you know, there's nothing unusual about it because the Soviet Union had all kinds of propaganda programs designed to prevent the Soviet people from engaging any number of issues, and succeeded until the whole thing eventually collapsed under the weight of its own mass mendacity. The U.S. government is simply emulating that, but, you know, it's not trying to do it across the board, though I must admit, as I've grown older, as we've approached the modern, you know, the present time, I'm starting to see increasing evidence that the UFO ET issue wasn't the only area where the government decided that that simply a straightforward presentation of the facts to the people was in their interest, and that they have been manipulating reality in a number of other areas. They haven't reached the level of the Soviet Union, but it's gone certainly far enough that it is absolutely unacceptable to our constitutional republic in the United States. And let me be clear that our allies, including Canada and Australia and the United Kingdom, and I think France as well, and other nations, have gone along with this. They are complicit in this without question. And they have to answer for this as well. But the truth embargo was primarily practiced in the United States. I think the U.S. government rightly calculated that if they can keep the American people baffled on this, and if they can keep the citizen effort going around in circles, that probably it wouldn't be that difficult for the other nations to stay in line. And so I guess you could say that we carried the water. And the Canada and the United Kingdom and Australia and some of these other countries just basically rode along with, on the back of, the truth embargo. They didn't have to work that hard in those countries to keep their citizens basically out of the game. But of course, that's all changing now, Robert. And other countries are stepping out. And this whole thing is coming down around it. Let me make it very clear. The truth embargo's days are nearly over.
You know, Steve, the European news is giving the press conference already front page coverage.
I'm not surprised. This is a big one.
However,
Robert, I said it in a press release I sent out yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
That we are only one media feeding frenzy away from the end of the truth embargo, and this could be it. All
right, but here's the other side of the coin. The U.S. media and the Canadian media are giving it very little. In fact, it's not even listed on CNN's site.
Well, I think people need to search again. CNN, I have confirmation that CNN live streamed the whole thing. Now, when they live stream a conference like that, it's archived. It's up there. You can find it.
Well,
now, so that means that the full press conference is going to be available to every reporter in the world. So, I mean, the thing only ended an hour and a half ago, and they probably didn't complete their one-on-one interviews until about 20 minutes ago.
But what I'm saying, Steve, is that there is media out there that is showing tidbits. Most of it is the Reuters or AOL feed releases. And yet CNN, that was there and did an actual 2-hour live stream, has nothing on their website about it.
I will predict there will be something on that website before the day is over. This kind of story is not like, some starlet, some movie star gets arrested for drunken driving. It's like boom, bang, there it is.
Okay.
This is extremely complicated stuff, and I think they are correctly digesting it, and I think if they're smart, they are going to digest it a little bit and put something up. I'm not concerned that something will not be up. CNN will put material up. But, others are going to. This is, let me put it this way. If about 4 days from now, there has been very little coverage in the American press, I will be stunned. And it will be a huge indictment of the American press once again. But the international press is going to be on it, and that's going to feed back here eventually.
I watched CNN this morning. I watched a number of the morning news shows just to see if the conference would get any morning coverage, and it didn't.
It didn't get leading coverage of CNN, but it did by Fox. Fox put out several stories and reprinted several stories that were up on the top Fox site. AOL News, particularly Lee Spiegel, ran several articles. There was decent advanced coverage. Again, the kind of advanced coverage it got was pretty darn good. Remember, the nature of this, it doesn't lend itself to the startling advanced coverage. I can assure you, if Britney Spears leaked out that she was going to hold a press conference at the National Press Club and announced that she's really a man, right, and that she'd undergone a sex change, there'd be 4,000 articles. But this is not that kind of thing. I can tell you from my experience that what I'm seeing so far has the potential to grow very, very rapidly. And what is supposed to happen next is that some reporters, based upon either being there or based upon seeing the press conference on the CNN video archive, should approach the press spokesperson for both the Department of Defense, the CIA, for the Defense Intelligence Committee, I forget who is current. They've had several changes there. And they need to be asked direct questions to pose to Gates and Panetta. This is compelling material. These are Air Force officers. These are affidavits. What is the response of the Department of Defense? Oh, by the way, and of course the Air Force. Now, let me be clear. One of the reasons the truth embargo, one of the principal reasons the truth embargo has lasted so long is not because, people in these levels of power, like Secretary of Defense and Secretary of Air Force, are brilliant at deftly dancing around such questions, because they're not. The reason the truth embargo has lasted is they don't get asked those questions. And if they ever do, particularly in this kind of a context where you've got signed affidavits and you've got former Air Force people with good records, I don't know what they're going to do. I think they're in an almost impossible situation. And the press has its limits. And so when the press sees a legitimate story and legitimate testimony, and some idiot, say the CIA's press office or the DOD's press office, says, "Oh, it's a bunch of clowns," they can get angry and come back at him with 8 more questions.
All right, stand by, Stephen.
Right at the edge of possibly a breakout here in the media.
Steve, stand by. You and I have to take our final break. Exo Nation, Stephen Bassett is our special guest. www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. That's www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
19 Sergeant Central. 19 Sergeant, check. Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world.
Explanation, Steve Bassett is our special guest. It's always great having Steve on the show. Steve, and I don't know if people tell you this enough, but thank you for doing the great work that you do. It's sincerely appreciated by millions of people.
Oh, thank you, Rob. And before we wrap up, I want to make sure that I, once again, sing the highest praise for Robert Hastings and Captain Robert Salas for putting together one of the most important press conferences on this subject ever held anywhere. It is the 3rd major witness press conference. The first was held in May of 2001 by the Disclosure Project. The second was held in November of 2007 by Leslie Kean and James Fox. This is the 3rd one, and this is a big one. And let me also mention that right now there are 3 books recently out. I mean, these are books within the last, 12 months, and sooner, that in and of themselves, if they were read by any editor or reporter uncompromised on this issue, should be enough to launch multi-part series in papers all across the country. And I'm referring to Robert Hastings' UFOs and Nukes, then Leslie Kean's UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Speak Out, with a foreword by John Podesta, and a book that will go on sale in a couple of days. Just went on sale. I'm referring to AD After Disclosure by Richard Dolan. These 3 books alone are more than enough to make it clear to any journalist that the biggest story of all time is breaking right now underneath their nose. And it's time to get on the side of the people and start bringing this information out. And so my hat's off to Bob, and we're going to support the media coverage of this to the extent we can.
So we've got about a minute left, Stephen. First of all, why do you think the government is so paranoid that the people of this planet find out the truth?
Paranoia is probably not the word. It's a mixture of arrogance. It's a mixture of overcaution. They know that half the people probably in the world right now already know the ETs are real, and, within the context of their education and background. 20% in a poll by Gallup. No, I think Gallup, yes. That believe that ETs are actually living amongst us. I don't know if that's the case, but that's a profound statement. No, this is a highly complicated, hugely geopolitical maneuver that is overdue. It should have happened. It couldn't happen before 91. There's no way that anybody inside military intelligence community was going to sell disclosure while there were 40,000 actually 80,000 nuclear warheads at the peak, active and ready to be launched across the poles between the Soviet Union and the United States. They just weren't going to do it. And so the disclosure of that wasn't even possible until after the Cold War ended. So we're really only 19 years into the period when disclosure should have happened. It's not an inordinate amount of time. But the fact is that it's a complicated world.
Steve,
there's a lot of considerations, and they just haven't done it. But I can tell you, they're running out of time, Rob. It's going to happen and happen soon.
We've run out of time, Steve. Thanks very much. If there's anything important that comes up, give me a call. We'll get you back on as soon as we can. Take care, good buddy.
Absolutely. All right.
Bye-bye now. Steve Bassett, www.paradigmresearchgroup.org. And I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.